All right, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got another interview with you today with a friend of mine. Let me introduce you to Jim. He is an international corporate pilot. We're going to talk all about his career today. So say hello to everybody out there, Jim.
Hey everybody,
Okay.
I'm Jim.
Well, like I said, thanks again for joining, Jim. But once again, for everybody watching out there, if you guys like what you're hearing and seeing, please hit the like button, leave comments down below, subscribe. Just helps me to keep the channel moving forward here, and helps me to continue sharing some of the stuff with you guys. So thank you so much if you have done so already. So we're just going to jump in, and I'll start throwing some questions at you, Jim. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is just to tell the audience a little bit about your initial interest in aviation. How did they get started? When was this? How did this come about in your life?
Well, there's a few ways that a lot of people kind of start their aviation career. People always ask, did you have a military background, or were you a civilian pilot? And then there's those who were born into it, whether it was military or civilian. So, in my case, my dad was an aircraft broker. Later, my parents ran little mom and pop FBOs. So, mom and pop meaning, just a little tiny place. Generally, aircraft sales, maybe a flight school, maybe a maintenance shop. But small airports, at any given time, it never seemed like anything was going on. But I grew up in that environment from day one. I mean, my first flights were in utero.
Okay.
So I would say, I don't know of a single day when aviation wasn't in my life. So it's definitely in my blood, and it's just been around me forever.
Yeah. So you're that story that it's like you said. You almost don't even remember a time when you wanted to do anything else. It was just always
That's right.
what your life
That's
was,
right.
was kind of
Yep.
born in to be there in that case. And like I said, I've shared this with so many other people, and a lot of the folks that I've talked to so far. I mean, that is the story. It's like we're lucky as the aviation types when you have this passion from a young age. I think it's kind of a unique thing where a lot of other peers of mine, they were still trying to find themselves, at a later point in their lives, and maybe even to this day to some extent. But we're lucky, so it's cool to hear you affirm that, and you had a similar story there. So very interesting. So along those lines, Jim, do you know, like, at what point in time, like, how did the decision come to be that, like, you weren't going to be a mechanic, you weren't going to be a controller or any other thing, you wanted to be a pilot, you wanted to fly the airplanes? Do you remember?
Oh yeah. It's and it's an important question, and it's different for every single person, and it fits you because it helps define you. So for me, you know, even to this day, my dad is, he's a hero to me. He's someone I look up to. When I was a young kid, I was just awestruck by the fact that he flew airplanes, and when I'd fly around with him, it was the best. It was the best day until the next time, and then that was the best day, and there was always this is the best day of my life, which is not a terrible way to grow up. It's
Okay.
not
Yeah.
a terrible situation to be in. I would imagine probably by the time I was 9 or 10 years old, I was probably, might have been a few years later when my dad talked about San Jose State and the aeronautics program. And I thought, well, here we are, just, a couple hour drive from there. I kind of grew up in the Bay Area until I was 8 or 9. So I was well familiar with the area, and certainly knew of the school, but to know that I could go get a degree in aeronautics, I mean, that was sealed right there, and I never looked back.
That
My
was it.
mom's side of the family were all Stanford grads, and of course, I was the first one to break that chain.
Okay.
But the point is that's what I want to do. Is an absolute passion, and I couldn't wait to get to college. Here's a 10, 11-year-old kid that can't wait to go to college. That's so
Yeah.
funny, but I knew that would catapult me, and I had to fly airplanes, and it was going to be whatever it took to do that. And that was the, I think, the beginning, the super catalyst that got me
Okay.
fired in that direction.
Excellent. Well, that really dovetails nicely into the next question that I was going to ask. There's a lot of guys and girls out there that they're kind of coming through high school, and they're just wanting to know, all right, I know that I want to be flying professionally at some point, but there's a tremendous amount of, let's say, learning curve or just understanding or knowledge gathering that it needs to occur to paint this picture about how you go basically from, like you're describing, that young person at that point in your life to where you're at now. So I mean, if you could just try to take us from like getting out of high school to where you are now, and I understand that that might be kind of a long story, but as much time as or details you want to share, I think that's tremendously useful to folks to know your story, let's say.
Absolutely, and I will try to keep this interesting, and I promise I won't start with, well, this first day. So I was lucky enough to have access to an airplane to learn to fly when I was a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I had I'd say probably about an 8-month period there where by the time I graduated from high school, I was pretty close to taking my private pilot check ride.
Mm-hmm.
And as some of you know, and some may not, but that's sort of the beginning. That's that first license you get. And then that's really a fork in the road. If you're going to just be a person that down the street that knows how to fly and takes their neighbors for a spin, then that's great. But if not, then, that's the beginning of your progression into, professional aviation. And it becomes, increasingly more difficult and challenging to do it. But, I knew I had San Jose State in my sights. I probably had 80 or 90 hours when I graduated or when I got my private license, and headed to San Jose to continue not only my education, but to also chase those ratings, as we call it, the instrument rating and the commercial certificate, and then onwards from there. Um, you know, Something that I think is important, and I try to implore this to the younger generation. You've heard the term pay your dues. And I've always believed that you're not allowed to say that about yourself. Everybody can say it about you, but you can't say it. And the reason why I say that is that, humility is important. Humility in aviation, whether you're a pilot, mechanic, flight attendant, dispatcher, it really doesn't matter. Aircraft manufacturer, an engineer. The fact is that, we don't have control of Mother Nature. We don't have control of a lot of things. And at the end of the day, if you are humble and you understand that you have really, your limits are your limits. The airplane has its limits. Your employees do, whatever it may be. And that's as long as we follow those guidelines, that gives us the best chance of success. It's still not a guarantee, but I felt like I was going to pay my dues, but I had some good mentors early on, and I learned to never say that to people, because now when I interview someone, I don't necessarily really want to hear that, because guess what? We're all still paying them.
Absolutely.
And we'll pay them after we retire. Yep. I mean, you're just always going to pay, right?
That's right.
So, I know where people are coming from when they say that, and I understand it. But to me, it doesn't really resonate. So for me, when I say, Mike, he's paid his dues. He deserves the job he has. He works hard. He goes out and gives back. Good for him. That's okay for me to say that, but I'm not going to say it about myself. Yeah. So to that point, this kind of this sort of starts off the story, but basically I've had now 14 flying jobs.
Okay, wow.
In 30 years of flying professionally, and I haven't been fired from any of them, okay, unless you count, being furloughed at American Airlines as one of them. But no one asked me to leave, no one asked me to resign. I was always I call it one foot on one lily pad, and you got to put your foot on the next one, or you're going in the drink. And I jumped across a lot of those things, and sometimes it was because I thought this is a great thing to have for a rainy day. Yeah. As the industry does its cycles, maybe I want to have this job where I was a pilot in command on an airliner, or maybe I want this job because this was a cool corporate jet to fly, and whatever the case may be. So, I think, it's important that you have a passion, and it's certainly great if you do. I think you mentioned in one of your past interviews that sometimes people are completely driven from the time they were very young, and others, check a box and say that sounds like a really cool career or a cool technical thing to do. Also completely great. And I know a lot of pilots and mechanics who are from both camps, right, and they're fantastic people and they're wonderful at what they do. I trust them implicitly. So that doesn't necessarily matter. But I am truly blessed with having had this experience so far. And I guess you could say I've so far paid some dues,
Yeah, I would say
but
so.
I haven't paid them all. And I don't plan to ever say that I have. I can just say, I had a great career, and I'm appreciative of everything that everybody did to help me. And on that note, it's also important for me to mention that everybody needs to have a mentor. Everybody needs to have two. Everybody needs to have support, and it may just be your family. It may be your circle of friends. It might also be other professionals and people that may not even be in your industry. But in aviation, for instance, obviously most of the people I know now are in the industry, and it's scary. It's probably 90%.
Yeah.
But you surround yourself with people who and people who share your interests. And I would have to say, without a doubt, that I am where I am today because a lot of people really, really helped me.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point, and it's definitely something I'm always telling everybody that's curious about this career track. So it's no pilot anywhere has gotten to where they are without a little help or without
Right.
the mentoring, the
Right.
assistance, whatever you want to say. So and this is very
Right.
much like a pay it back kind of industry, which I think is really unique, and I'm proud of that. That so many pilots are so eager to turn around, and we all know how it was to be there when you got 10 hours in your logbook and you're looking up at the sky at the jet flying by, and you just, how do I get there, kind of thing. So
Right.
it's cool
Right.
to hear you to affirm that and say that. And one of the other things I really I liked about what you said there, Jim, was just coming back to the part about the dues paying. I've seen a little bit of discouragement from some of the folks that I've talked with a little bit before, and we were very lucky in the last couple of years where things were moving so fast, and you could just buzz right through your training. You could hop into a high performance aircraft very quickly, and then when things kind of have begun to slow down, people are really hanging their heads. Oh, gee, it's going to take me a lot longer, and I understand that, but I think it's great to hear that the reiteration of the fact like we've all had to make some maneuvers and do some different things and put in our time. And it's not to say that some of it's a little bit of luck with the timing, but some of it is just the road and the journey. And that's what I've always tried to stress to people is hey, don't be in such a rush to grow up and get whatever you perceive to be the golden job. The whole process,
Right.
the whole journey is part of the fun of it. And just like hey, if you got to take another stepping stone or a side path or whatever, and that's part of your dues paying, like just make the most of it. Have fun with it. And it's
I couldn't agree more. And when you look back, whether you are I'm going to tell my grandkids kind of person, or whether you want to tell a story at a party, or whether you want to impress somebody that you're interested in, it doesn't really matter what your audience is. To reply in a mechanical, robotic response. Oh yeah, I had this happen, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this was handed to me, and that is that the story do you want to hear, or do you want to hear about trials and tribulations?
yeah.
Someone that's had a human condition, a struggle.
Yep.
And I can say, and this is a great segue, as we are facing the first slowdown in many years, you've enjoyed a decade or better of just solid growth. So have I. Same
Yep.
time period for both of us. And we almost have to look back deeply at the last time that things were a little arduous, a little more difficult. When we were saying, wow, when are they going to hire pilots and mechanics? And when are the airlines going to grow? And when are there going to be corporate pilot jobs for me to pick from? Instead of there's one and 100 people jumping on it. And the fact of the matter is when I got my start, it was a terrible time. I mean, you have good times and you have, let's just say, bad timing, right? So I got out of college in the late 80s rather, and nothing happened for a long time.
Yep.
And I managed to get myself a job, as my dad still says to this day, at 83, kid, it's a lot easier to get a job when you have one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a flying job, and it took me 4 years to get my first airline job. I mean, nothing was happening. Tumbleweed rolling across in front, and so, for me, all that did was make me want it that much more. And once I had that first job, I was so appreciative of it. And yes, I probably still complained here and there about this, that, and the other. Part of that is just a natural thing with aviators. I don't know what it is.
There is.
My dad just cracks up when he says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe." You from the minute you don't have it to the minute you do have it, what a transformation.
Yep.
But I think it's really important for there to be just a little bit of a challenge out there, because I think that's also what helps you stay humble,
Yeah.
and helps you, I think, keep things in perspective.
Yeah.
It helps you in life, not just with your career.
Absolutely. And I do think it is somewhat of a great differentiator amongst the masses of folks. I mean, the people that are really, truly passionate about this, and this is your love, it doesn't matter if it's a 10-year economic depression or whatever. It's like you're doing this because you
Right.
love it. And it's, just
Right.
always something I try to instill in people is that fact alone
Right.
there. So let me just circle back real quick, Jim. So to take it, once again, your story. So you were a civilian trackway individual the whole way along then, as I understand it.
That's correct. I made my way to, believe it or not, my first airline job that I just spoke of was actually a regional, and it was based in this little town up in the north called Anchorage.
Okay.
So here, this California kid shows up with his hush puppies and his 501s, and I don't know, I was in my early 20s, and had now some experience flying airplanes, but yeah, I was a co-pilot on a Metroliner. Be an interesting graphic for you to put up there
Right.
when the interview goes. It's one of the first 19-seat airliners that we flew around anywhere in the U.S. And so that led to bush flying. The same company sent me out to fly single-engine airplanes in the bush, Cherokee 6s, Saratogas. I now own a Cherokee 6. It's very near and dear to my heart. And in fact, we can touch on this later, but we do a lot of giving back with that airplane. It's a wonderful platform for that. But yeah, I managed to make the major airlines, Transworld Airlines, TWA, at age 29. So I went to the shows, we call it.
Wow.
As a pretty young person, when my timing wasn't wonderful. So it was quite an accomplishment to me. I always will consider that to be one of the greatest moments in my career, and certainly in my life. Just a proud moment, a great airline with a great safety record. I mean, I really felt proud to be part of that group. And then I got to do a lot of the jobs that people do before the majors. I got to do them after,
Okay.
because after the furlough, I had 7 more jobs
Okay.
before I have the one I have now.
Okay.
So I got to be a regional airline captain. With my experience, I actually got to walk onto the property as a captain.
Okay.
So the co-pilot was senior to me. So if there were going to be layoffs, I was going to go first. But I did get a chance to do some left seat 121 flying, which was, oh my gosh, what an education.
Yep.
And, I got to fly some more corporate airplanes. I flew some what turned out to be high-profile people that were just running for governor, and then they turned out to be the state's senator for a decade.
Okay.
And if they walked up to me today, they'd be like, "Hey, Jim, how you doing?"
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. So I got to do, a lot of people have some very challenging and some very rewarding steps to get to their ultimate top job, and I will say that I have been so lucky in that regard. I've got to do a lot of things that not a lot of people have gotten to do.
Wow. And I think, hearing you say all that, it does paint this picture as well that I think a lot, that's one of the questions that folks have, once again, is, you don't just go from the piston single, training aircraft into a high performance jet cockpit. It's like, what Jim's saying is, he flew, a little bit bigger piston, and then it was like a twin engine piston, and then it was a turboprop, and then it was a little jet airliner, and then it was a big one, and now, corporate stuff. So it's just, all you guys and girls out there that are watching, I mean, like, I think probably most of you guys have that concept, but just, there it is right there for you, laid it out. So,
yeah, and it can come in many forms, and in sometimes not in quite the order that you think it's going to. And I remember, oh, there's a lot of funny stories, and And it just all it does is lend to the pride that you have for your profession, and the fact that you've hung on, and the fact that not only are we maybe facing some tougher times, but they're not going to be the last times
Right.
that are tough.
Yep.
And one of your other interviewees said it well not too long ago, that and a lot of people today are saying that we're in this together, and we absolutely are in this together, as we deal with global problems. But we will endure.
Of course.
And as an aviator, especially, whether you're a mechanic, whether you're a flight attendant, whether you're dispatching, it doesn't really matter. But certainly as a pilot, the type A personality, it's a challenge. And you look to that challenge as something that you're interested in tackling, and you want to solve a problem. And sometimes when you've got two or three choices, some people go nuts. Oh no, I've got three choices. I'm never going to decide. And you and I have already decided, and we've got our backup, and we've already moved on, because that's just how we thrive. We thrive with that. And so that's a cool thing to learn, and it's a cool thing to hone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too, hearing you say that makes me think about the parallels between like airmanship skills and decision making and all this kind of stuff, and all, just as that applies to your life and your career in general. You have to be adaptable.
Correct.
You have to find a way to meet the failure is not an option kind of thing. Like,
That's right.
you got to solve the problem.
That's so true.
Um,
Absolutely.
Same could be said for your career, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt.
kind of a cool parallel there. Okay. Well, let's go on to the next one, Jim. So the next thing that I wanted to talk a little bit is about your career and your job specifically right now. I think you have a very cool, unique type of flying job that not a lot of people get to be a part of. So, I mean, just to, and maybe in part of just telling somebody about what your general day at work looks like, and maybe contrasting that a little bit to what a lot of people think of right off the bat, and that's just the airline pilot job, which is a little more cut and dry and simple, I would say, by contrast to something more specialized as far as what you're doing. So maybe if you could just, like I said, just tell us about a day in the life of your job as an international corporate pilot.
Happy to. And of course, pilots, they hate to talk about themselves and about the airplanes they fly, and the cool places that they go. But I will say this, to preface this, a good friend of mine, who I've done some aviation speaking with and done some writing with. He's he's got a good family aviation name. He says, the best way to describe the difference between an airline pilot and a corporate pilot is, at the airlines, you have control of your life when you're not working. Mm-hmm. And when you're flying corporate jets around, flying expensive people or high net worth individuals, you really have, control of your life while you're working, while you're at work, if that makes a little bit of sense. So, okay. In a nutshell, I can't get the days off and as many days off as you have. I mean, you're an airline guy, you're a lady working for the airlines, your schedule is your life, and you can work your life around, or you can work your work around your life. And for me, it's the other way around. I'm on call a lot. I only have a few real days off a month that I can call my own. Mm-hmm. But I also work for a company that's completely wants me to have a balance. So I can get days off if I need them. I'm not going to miss anything critical. I'm going to be there, hopefully, for most of the stuff that's important. So as my daughter grows up, I've been able to see and do a lot of the things that, that are important to everybody when they have a family. The airplane I fly is what's called an ultra large cabin business jet, which means, it's the top of the food chain in corporate jets. So it's big. It weighs almost 100,000 pounds. Okay. It carries almost half that weight in fuel. So I can't load 138 people in the back like the Airbus pilot, but I can put on 13 hours worth of gas, and I can fly that airplane a third of the way around the world without stopping. And it's just crazy. I mean, it's really amazing. We call it a yes airplane. The Gulfstream 550 is an iteration of the first Gulfstream back in the late 50s, the G1. It is now, they're up to G700. So they've got 7 or 8 of these different models now. But this is about the 5th one or 6th one. And It's truly an amazing airplane. It'll do just about anything you want. It'll fly routinely at 47,000, 49,000 feet. I've had it to 51,000 feet twice, which is its maximum altitude.
Okay.
You can almost start to see the curvature of the earth. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people say yeah, some people say no. I don't know. But all I know is that when we just start a descent out of that altitude, somebody, usually an airline person, gets on the radio and says, "Hey, center, what's that airplane coming out of 490?"
Right.
And one time a controller said that would be a G5 coming out of orbit.
There you go.
And it's kind of a cool deal. So we have an airplane that flies. It can handle an awful lot in terms of getting in and out of short runways and yet still flying a long way. We can fly high, as I just talked about, which, it still presents you some issues when you're dealing with thunderstorms and weather fronts and so forth. You still have to have just as much appreciation and respect for that weather as anybody else. That does not change one bit, but it can make it a little bit more comfortable when you're well above all of the clouds, sipping coffee and talking about what we're going to do when we get there. And that's part of what I was saying before. Once we get there, we may have 2 or 3 days, we may have just one night, but most of the time, unlike the airlines, we may have a couple of days solid where we are at our hotel and the city is at our beck and call, so we can go do what we want, see a lot of places, and have time to do that. So we're flying these people around from meeting to meeting. These are extremely influential people who need the ultimate in not just safety, but also in security. So it's secure for the company because there's not somebody sitting in the row behind you looking over your shoulder at your computer. Things that could be very important and certainly not public. Yeah. So this is a private office, if you will. And for large corporations with a ton of revenue and profit and worth, value on the market, that this is just an absolute must. No pain, no gain, they say in the business jet world, and that is a true statement. So for me, I'm my cell phone and my internet connection are a must, and we are lucky in that we have a 100% business related flying. We're not maybe chasing a yacht like some people do. Some people are flying individuals with as much money as there is, and for us, it's a business. It's a business operation. We fly to places all over the world. And they do their business and we continue on. But the cool thing is in most places in Asia and in Europe, we can come straight home. Yeah. And I've never stopped in Greenland or Iceland every time I've gone to Europe. And I've been flying this airplane for 12 years now. So the Gulfstream is just an absolutely tremendous airplane. And we get a chance to not only fly this great equipment, but we get to see some neat places. I think I've now been to about 30 different countries with this company, and probably 80 or 90 cities, international cities, and had some time to spend looking around and experiencing the culture and the people. And I'll tell you, every one of them is fantastic. It's really been great.
Well, that point right there is something I wanted to highlight for folks, and you can correct me at any point if I'm wrong about this, but my perception, Jim, is that you guys on that corporate side there, it is such a sharp contrast to the airline person where we go to some cool places, but after a while you operate to the same 12 cities, regardless if you're a domestic or international guy, and there's still a lot of cool to be had there. But you guys, you're going into some very different destinations. You're operating into places that are never going to see an airliner ever. So it's just, if you're one of those guys or girls out there that you're really into the travel and exploring, I mean, I perceive that the corporate type of international operation anyways is you have this unparalleled experience in that regard. So I mean, would you agree?
You do. You absolutely do. And with that comes some a whole, I guess you could say, a whole new set of responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So I mean, not only are you in a foreign environment, which may or may not, require a lot of pre-flighting, if you will, the security, that's involved. But, you jump in your airliner, there's been probably 30 people that have touched your flight plan and touched your airplane and looked at weather and stocked it and cleaned it and so forth and so on. And, when you're flying a corporate jet, even one that's, multi-million dollar piece of equipment, it's your show. You're not only the pilot in command or the second in command, or in our case, all of us are captains. So we're all captains. Somebody's the lead, but the rest of us are all PIC qualified. And, somebody has to be in charge of that airplane. And if that's you, you got to keep your crew safe. You don't just call mom when there's a problem. You have to be in charge of your crew on the ground, and you have to make sure your dispatcher, you've had, a dispatcher on in this series who is a near dear friend of mine as well, and one of the best in the industry ever. And now I think back and think, how did I ever get along without him? Right. And how am I ever going to get along if I ever work someplace else or he does? And right. I'm thinking, man, this is just, it's great, but it's not always. I mean, there are times when you are faced with filing a flight plan in a strange and unfamiliar world, or you're faced with a situation where you're going off of your normal schedule, and you've got to deal with that. And when you're in the corporate world, a lot of that stuff may fall on your shoulders, and you just, again, as you said, if you are adventurous and you don't mind the extra, I don't know, maybe the extra pressure that sometimes comes with that, then you're going to do great. If you love to go fly, like you said, to your 12 or 14 places, and if you're at a great landing, you stand there and say goodbye to everybody, and if it wasn't, you run off the plane, before anybody can catch you, and you're home before anybody ever worries about it. But they're still very similar in a lot of ways. But in this case, this is where they differ often, is that once you get on the road with that airplane, you are largely responsible for so much more than just getting it from A to B. Right. And that can sometimes be great, and sometimes you just think, why am I doing this? So, like anything, good days and bad for sure.
There's ups and downs. And that, all these elements are things that I challenge people to really think long and hard about, because I think we could make some, statement along the lines of that, hey, an airplane's an airplane. The aerodynamics work the same way, whether or not you're in a Gulfstream or an Airbus or whatever you're flying. So, to some extent, flying is fine, but there is so many other facets. When you're talking about doing this for a career, is that, what do you want your life to look like? What, types of things do you want to deal with? Because like Jim is saying here, I mean, there's ups and downs to everything. And I've always tried to tell people, hey, there's not one size suits all. I mean, some jobs are right for some people and some are more fit for others. And it's, whatever you want with your life is really should be the driver there behind those types of
Absolutely.
decisions. But
absolutely.
Just like something to really dial down and think about when you're trying to direct your career pursuits, like we're all the stuff we're talking about with the specifics of each job, let's say. So, all right, Jim. Let's see. The next question I have for you is, for somebody out there that is specifically desiring to be a corporate jet pilot, is there one piece of advice that you could offer them?
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't think this has changed much. Just because I remember I talked about being mentored, and I think that corporate aviation, is something that I was close to while I was going through college. I worked out at the airport and worked for a fixed basis operator, an FBO. So these are the gas stations for all the private airplanes, right? And you'd look across the field and see all the airliners. And I had friends at San Jose State who worked for the airlines. And then there was those of us pumping gas over on the other side of the airport. And, they both offered, maybe an avenue to advancement. Once we got out of school, we had some contacts. So networking is certainly important. From the corporate side, what I liked about it was I could change my work schedule based on my college classes. Mm-hmm. So although I was there to get an education, I was supposed to stay in school. And, if you get your work schedule and it doesn't match up, then how are you going to do that, right? So for me, I was able to go into my boss and say, hey, I got my classes and these are the shifts I can work, and they would always work with you. Okay. So then that leads to me being out on the ramp working these corporate airplanes, and whether they're, a single engine airplane or whether they're a big turboprop, big at the time would be, King Air, something that you saw a lot of on the ramp. Still very expensive and takes a little bit to become a crew on that airplane. And a lot of times you'd make friends with these pilots, and he or she would take you for a flight. Pretty soon you're putting on your nice clothes and acting like an official co-pilot, if you will.
Yep.
And you just glean so much information from that. So you're getting to say exposed to corporate aviation by working on the ramp there, and you're making contacts, but more importantly, you're showing your gumption, you're showing your humility, you're showing your appreciation for not only what they do, but you're certainly appreciative of everything that it takes for that whole world to spin.
Yeah.
Appreciative of the customers, the people in the back of the plane that are paying the bills, all your coworkers who are helping to make that airplane go from A to B. You are the ground crew, more or less, of just like across the field, all those people working for United or Alaska or American. And so I would say the most important thing is that when you decide that's a path you want to take, and as you said, Mike, you may change your mind. It's no big deal. It may be a step. It might be a step back, and it might or might not even be your choice. But the beautiful thing about it is, as I've been so lucky to do, I've been able to fly charter, and I've been able to fly fancy people around, and I've been able to work for a big giant corporation, and I've been able to work for a big giant airline. And I've done all those jobs. It doesn't necessarily make me super good at any of them, but I have done them. And when you throw your resume down, that is helpful. But I think it's important to get mentored, find that protege or proteges, people who really want to help you because it looks like you want to help yourself, and you can write your own ticket. It is just, I love it when I have gumptious young people that really want to. I don't care what kind of flying they want to do. If they want my help, I am there to help them because I know that it's in their blood and they're not going to give it up.
Yeah. Well, and, one thing I want to kind of package up and restate that you said I think is very important is what you're describing here is this concept of networking, and not only does it go to the point of just getting to know a professional here or there, but what Jim is describing is like, okay, not only do you get to know them, you foster a relationship, but you show your passion or you show your enthusiasm, you show your worth to them. Like maybe you're working on the ramp, or maybe they just see you working hard, and it's just that networking alone is just tremendously powerful with propelling you in whatever direction you want to go, whatever job you want to end up at. So in Jim's case, working at the FBO or the service center where the corporate jets anyways are coming in and out of every day, things like that, or if you're really trying to angle towards one direction, I would say is just first of all the networking, but put yourself in that environment where these things are that you want to end up in. It's pretty simple, but just something I like I said to wrap that all up there, Jim. So okay, very good. Well, how about the last formatted question that I had for you before we can go off and into a few tangents? What is it that you love the most about your job as a corporate pilot?
It's funny. I figured you were going to ask me this question, and I purposely didn't really give it any thought because I didn't want it to seem, canned in any way. So I think you can tell that I'm, one of those people that will always appreciate not just aviation and the industry and certainly all the wonderful people who work in it. But, I don't know that I have a favorite. I'm that caught up in it. When people say, "Oh, I do what I love," okay, and that's not shallow. I don't care if you're an accountant. I don't care if it doesn't matter, trim trees or dig holes, or whether you're a CEO of a major corporation. When they say, "I love what I do," I think most people that's a pretty sincere statement. And I just, when I walk up to the Gulfstream, I say, this is the airplane I have the keys to. That's what a pilot mentor of mine, one of the funniest guys I'll ever know. And yet I always loved his saying, my favorite airplane is the airplane I have the keys to. Right. And right now that's the one I do. And there's just nothing about it I don't love. And when I get in the cockpit, it doesn't matter who I'm flying with. I'm going to have the same great time because everybody there is wonderful. It's a family. Everybody's got each other's backs, and when we go launch on an adventure, that's just what it is. And so, it's not, I just don't think there's a single thing about it that sticks out other than I love getting up and going to work. And especially right now when we're not doing a lot of getting up and going to work, man, you sure
It's
appreciate it.
it's
I
nice.
mean,
Yeah.
it really is nice. Yeah.
Well, what?
So I'm blessed that way for sure.
Yeah. One thing this makes me think of is, and this sounds so cheesy, and I think a lot of us throw this line around, but it to me, honestly, a lot of times it does not feel like a job. Now, I don't want to admit that to my employer who's paying my paychecks every day,
Right.
but
Right.
I've had like a job before where I sat in a cubicle in front of a computer. That was a job, an arduous, monotonous, not fun thing to be doing. But I go to the airport and same type of thing where you're describing. You show up at this airplane, you're like, wow, I have all this responsibility. I get to do this today. This is such a privilege, and you're there, and you're just enjoying the everything that every single flight is. It's just it really is a miracle in many
It
regards.
is. It is. You sometimes you got to pinch yourself for sure.
Yeah,
No doubt about it.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's cool to hear you say that as well. Well, at this point in time, I've asked you, most of the general questions, like I said, but I wanted to open up the floor, Jim, to you to if there's anything that you feel is good to communicate to anybody that's listening out there. Anything else you want to share or talk about? We can get into that now.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things, maybe a housekeeping item, and I've heard some of your other interviewees talk about this, about the perseverance. So there's going to be some trying times and so forth. But what I found that even during the trying times, when maybe economically things are tough, or maybe when it's hard to find a job, maybe you took a job and that's gonna create a better one. Well, then if we have a little bit of a setback or a downturn, maybe that second or third or 10th job or whatever it is maybe it's a little farther out of reach. But you got to keep persevering. You got to keep the nose to the grindstone. And you just got to remember, somebody once said to me, when you reach the level of airline transport pilot, which doesn't necessarily mean you're flying for the airlines suit to everybody out there listening, but it's the highest, certificate you can achieve. And it really does catapult you into that last level. And you can't be a captain, flying these airplanes around without one. But my point is, as someone once said to me, you have to act like an ATP when you're in the line at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just resonated with me. And every time I feel like I might lose it, and anytime I might, not show my best colors in public, I think, wait a minute, I have to hold up the industry. I have to be the one person maybe today that makes a difference, or I have to be that person that doesn't give the rest of the world a reason to look down or to be disappointed. And certainly when you want respect, when you're at the airport and you want your passengers and your fellow coworkers and whoever else, certainly your employer, to respect you, you got to play the part. And that just means you got to be on your A game, even when you're in your flip-flops, which, yes, I am. I haven't worn shoes in a long time now. But, when you're out there casual, you still have to kind of have that air of command, authority, professionalism. That's not to say you can't be yourself at all, but you do have that. You have the little bit of that microscope, or that magnifying glass on you. And, I think that's a super important thing to keep in the back of your mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really important message. And it's so funny to think of myself saying these things. I'm 37 years old. I'm not trying to dad anybody out there, but for a younger generation coming, just living in the now, I'm always telling people, hey, be careful what you're putting on social media. Be careful who you associate. Be careful, what you do with your life and your outside world. Because if you are serious about becoming one of these people in our society that has a lot, or is given a lot of responsibility to go fly airplanes and do this stuff, like all those things add up and they all matter. And if you have to be thinking in this mindset that Jim's talking about. It's like you don't just come home and take off your uniform and now it all suddenly disappears. Like you hold yourself to a higher standard. Like be that professional that's going to be comfortable. Somebody putting their mom and dad on your aircraft, and just keep that in mind. I'm not saying you have to live a total rigid, not fun life, but just you have to start to think in this way of being responsible, and all these things are important. So.
Right. Toe the line pretty much
Yeah,
all the time, and choose your surroundings. Certainly,
yeah,
when you want to let your hair down, that's perfectly okay. But just
yeah,
just be aware of your. I think another great term is be aware of your audience.
yeah,
Are you cognizant of what's going on around you?
yeah.
And so I certainly think that's important. But and certainly don't want to insinuate that you can't absolutely be yourself, because
Right.
I think you've mentioned that in the past to your viewers, that you absolutely do. That
Yeah.
this, personality is 99% of this. And incidentally, I became a dad at your age, so you can dad it up here if you
Okay.
want.
All
I,
right. Just a
I
little
when I
bit.
was 37, I had a newborn. Now she's driving.
Okay.
Ah.
There you go.
So anyway, but the other important thing that really is true to me, to my near and dear to me, I should say, is physically giving back,
Hmm.
um, and not just in the aviation community, but giving back with it.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a couple of examples. I My wife, she and I have been married for 7 years, and when we started to date, she thought, well, I'm going to learn how to land the airplane, like a pinch hitter course, because what if something happens to Jim? So she went up on a flight and she landed, and she said, blank this, I'm not just going to learn how to land. And she's a private pilot
Okay.
with
All right.
about 250 hours now. And so she and I fly as a crew. She makes me a much better pilot.
Yeah.
She keeps me into the realm of two pilot crew and the safety and keeping your head outside looking for airplanes and all the wonderful things that keep you as safe as you can be. But what else happened is that she's one of the most compassionate, giving people ever. And what she and I have managed to do over the years is, using our airplane, we do a lot of work with charities,
Okay.
and we auction off me and the airplane together as a airplane and its pilot
Okay.
to various charities. So a lot of times
Wow.
we'll just put a flight out there, and people will bid on that flight for whatever charity is that's near and dear to them. So it doesn't really matter what we're doing it for,
Yeah.
but somebody has given this organization money, and now we're donating our time and our fuel and certainly our experience to let these people enjoy general aviation. So I've gotten to work with some wonderful charities and some absolutely wonderful people. Some of them are returned now. They bid on that flight every year at that same charity, and they win it
Wow.
every year, and they come back. And it is truly a cool experience to not only um, be proud of your profession, but to really feel like you're making a difference. And yeah, I mean, who the heck gets to go to work and love it, and then on your day off go fly around and try to help your community or your world, or even if it's just one person, putting a smile on a face, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And the kid next door going for his first flight, or someone as donated $500 to breast cancer or to special needs kids or whatever it might be, and now you get to take a day and fly these people to a dinner in the wine country, or go fly them over the Golden Gate Bridge, or both.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think giving back, student mentorships. My next door neighbor, hook, line, and sinker, going to be a professional pilot. He's 18.
Okay.
He's just about to get his private pilot's license.
Great.
And I know I was a big part of that. He needed the drive, but I was the catalyst. I gave him those flights. I gave him the exposure to flying around in airplanes, and he's never going to look back.
Yeah.
And it is truly rewarding.
Yeah.
So I cannot implore enough that when you find it is whatever it is that makes you happy, and whatever it is that you do, even if it's not a career, if you just do it on the side and you can turn it into something good and help, I can't stress enough how important that is.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one thing that also makes me think of is a little bit of my own story, where I was so fortunate and had such amazing help from some amazing people like early on in my life. But that was a large reason why I've tried to turn around now and give a little bit of something back with what I'm doing at this point. And it's just something to keep with you guys and girls out there as you come through. I know, like right now, you might feel like you're at square one, but there will come a day where you will walk this path and you'll get to where you want to be. But just, yeah, I encourage you to, at that point, give back. Because we, like I was saying before in the conversation here, we're very fortunate in aviation that we live in this almost like self-sustaining, self-caring, like micro circle or whatever you want to say of professionals and people. And anybody who's in aviation knows this. It's just, it really is a giant family, and it a large reason why it is what it is, and that people find success they do is because of that. So we got to keep that going, keep that cycle.
We do. We absolutely do. And it is so fun to walk into a room, and even if there's only one other aviator, and they don't, they can work on planes, they can be wrenches, they can be flight attendants, they can, oh, my dad used to own an airplane, or I'm a pilot, but I'm no longer flying. I got married and life got in the way, and so forth and so on. And that is, to me, I can sit there and talk to that person. In fact, you have to be careful not to monopolize that person.
Exactly.
If you're at a party, oh, the two pilots are over there, you're never going to get a word in edgewise over there. Yeah. But what's really cool about that, Mike, is that you've got, first of all, you're making a friend, and you've got a common interest, and it's, as you said, it's family. So it's an instant bond. I mean, I'm sure there are many industries like that. But we're lucky that that's the way that is. And part of it is because we may share a cockpit, or we may share a job that's super important, super, safety related. We're gonna replace a component on an airplane, or we're gonna help a passenger who's sick, in the back or something. And we're gonna do that together. And we don't know if we will, but we might. But it's that kinship, that basis that is so important when you want to be a good crew. It's so nice to have that personal respect, of each other. And, and if you do run into somebody who used to do something, and I used to be a mechanic, or I used to fly, but now I don't. Well, maybe here's your chance to try and get them re-inspired.
Yeah.
Here's your chance to go take them for a flight. I mean, here's your, the new neighbor on the block. Hey, you want to go for an airplane ride? Oh, well, really? Well, yeah, everybody else in this whole neighborhood has gone flying with me. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then you must be all right. And who knows, you might get that person back, and that person might buy an airplane. And then there's that whole microeconomy that comes with the, rather spendy life that is owning an airplane, but all the wonderful things that go with it. So I'm lucky that I fly a jet for a living. I'm equally as lucky that we have the ability, and we have partners in our airplane, because it is it's a significant fiscal responsibility. But I mean, on my day off, and knowing that I can take off, especially in times like right now, I've been able to go fly around. It actually doesn't have a propeller right now. It's in the shop. Okay. Propeller is being overhauled. And I feel strange, because there's never really been a time when I didn't have an airplane at my disposal, at least not for the last 10 years since we've been airplane owners. And so it's strange to think, well, we can't really even get out of here if we wanted to. We got to get in a car.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I do love, as you said, the small world that aviation is fantastic.
Yeah. It's special. I've always felt it to be as such. So, well, one of the last things that I just wanted to kind of leave off the conversation with, Jim, unless you have any other topic matter that you could think to, I don't know if you want to talk about anything else until we close it out.
No, go ahead with your last statement and question.
Yeah, just we had started to talk very briefly about it when we first got on the Skype call. This was before I started the recording, everybody out there, but just it's such a time right now with all the the COVID-19 and the industry downturn that is we're kind of on the front end of this thing here. It's gonna get rough over the next couple of years. So I just want to leave some words of encouragement with all you guys and girls out there, that to keep the wind in your sails and not let yourself get discouraged, and not let yourself be so like tunnel vision into the now and get discouraged to the point where you don't even go down this track and try it. So I mean, like, just if you could back me up there, Jim, and give me your 2 cents on that point alone, is so helpful to people out there.
It's a very important point, and it's because, if we were talking about finance, or if we were talking about investing in companies, or if we were talking about, painting a house, being whatever it is that you and I would be talking about today. People that are in those industries are going to tell all their uh, proteges the same thing. They're mentees. They're going to say, we are maybe not thriving right now, or maybe we're not growing like we were even 6 months ago, but we're going to have our ups and downs. We're going to have our cycle. I mean, that's what a cycle is. It's a wave,
Yeah.
and it comes and goes. And you could pick any number of industries. You could probably pick 100 of them, and I'd say 98 of them are being impacted by what you're just talking about right now. Worldwide pandemic, some real social unrest, some serious barriers that we as a world have to face and have to conquer. And on top of that, the economic downturns that come with that sort of thing. And it doesn't matter if you're working on a car or working on an airplane or what. There are repercussions from that. And you'll realize just how strong you are as a person. And you'll realize that 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 reinforcing group that we talked about, the people and the companies that you work for, your employers, even when you're young, all those things come together, and you realize that those are still part of your arsenal. They're still tools for you,
Yeah.
whether it's calling an old boss or whether it's calling an old friend or it's talking to a friend you talked to yesterday. It doesn't really matter. Your family, your best friends, your kids, whatever. These are all tools, and these are all important in you keeping a focus on, this is just one day in the day of a life of a blank.
Yeah.
And if you're a pilot, you're a flight attendant, you're doing something in aviation that's to you is important, which is important all by itself. Um, you will prevail. And even though it has its rough patches, and even if you said, like you said, the rough patch may not even be here,
Yeah.
but we got through the last one.
Yeah. That's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
especially aviation. There's been a ton
Yeah.
of that, and it's really a testament to everybody who works in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Because the industry is people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so when they say
Absolutely.
the industry recovers, well, that's because the people were there to accept the passengers, and the passengers were willing to invest and to trust, and
Yeah.
so then all of a sudden the wheels are back on the cart.
Yeah.
And I think you can attest to this, when things are good, aviation's a pretty darn cool place to be, and you can't be in it during the good times if you didn't hang in there when things were challenging.
Yeah. Absolutely right. That's spot on, Jim. All right, Jim. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know this is going to be really helpful to a lot of folks watching out there. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I'm glad to help, and I wish everybody the best of luck if they have an interest in this. And of course, Mike can make me available with whatever he does, if that's the case. Always happy to talk to anybody. Always happy to be there to try and promote the industry, but also to promote you. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jim. Well, yeah, maybe we could leave some contact or something down in the description there if
Sure.
anybody's curious specifically about your job there. So,
Okay.
well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate you watching. So, hope everybody has a wonderful day, a good weekend, and we'll talk again real soon. Take care, Jim.
Thank you. Bye-bye.